What's going on, people? Welcome back to another episode of the FF Ballbusters podcast. My name is Will. That's my co-host Eric, and today we're going to be talking about players who underperformed at their ADP last season and who we feel like is going to have a bounce back going into the 2024 NFL season. But before we get into that, Eric, you got anything for the people?
Yeah, man. So, like we talked about last week, obviously we're coming off of a little bit of a hiatus. We've been gone for like 3 weeks or so, but we're getting back into the swing of things. We're putting out 2 videos a week. And I would like it if you guys could help us get back into the YouTube algorithm by interacting with the video. So, if you do enjoy the content, leave a like on it. If you haven't subbed already, hit that sub button. And also leave a comment down below what you think of our list today. And just if you have any general questions about your Dynasty teams, we'd love to talk to you about that. But yeah, I'm really excited to get into this one. So, let's start it.
Absolutely. So, as I said at the top, these are guys who could be labeled disappointments, I guess, based on where you guys drafted them last year, based on, ADP at the time, and based on where they finished at the season. So, we're going to go ahead and kick it off. Eric, who's the first player you wanted to bring up into this?
Yeah, the first guy that I have on my list is going to be Jaylen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. I kind of wanted to outline why he underperformed last year to start this thing off. The main thing that I'm sure a lot of you guys know if you were Waddle owners was injuries. He only got over a 70% snap share in a total of 6 games last year and was constantly being knocked out of games due to injury or dealing with nagging injuries that weren't even listed on the final injury report. So to that end, Ryan J. Heath here on Twitter listed out all of the injuries that he had last year. So weeks 1 and 2, he was limited with an oblique and knocked out of week 2 with a concussion. He was then out for week 3. Weeks 4 and 5, he had a sub 70% route share. I think it was actually sub 66% route share, likely due to Miami being cautious with the concussion. He left week 7 with a back injury. He was limited in practice all week, but didn't have a designation going into the weekend for week 8. He left and returned with a knee injury in week 9, and then again with a high ankle sprain in week 16. And so the only time that Waddle actually carried a designation heading into a weekend was week 3. So even though it might have seemed like he was healthy and was just getting knocked out of all of these games, he was actually carrying some nagging injuries. So I thought that was an interesting note to bring up. But in terms of his efficiency and how he actually performed when he was on the field, he in those games that I mentioned where he was over a 70% route share, he averaged 14.4 underdog fantasy points per game, which was 8th best in the league, and had 83.3 receiving yards per game, which was 10th best in the league. And then on top of that, in terms of his per route efficiency, he was top 8 in terms of yards per route run and top 5 amongst wide receivers in PFF receiving grade for all of last year. So he genuinely performed really well when on the field. It's just that he was off the field for a lot of last year. And the reasons that I think that he will have a bounce back, the efficiency has been a calling card of his dating back to his days at Alabama. I don't expect that to regress. I expect him to be healthier this year. This was definitely an outlier year for him in terms of the amount of time that he missed. And then also he had bad touchdown luck this last year. He only scored 4 touchdowns and only scored a touchdown every 250 yards gained, which is 33% worse than the league average for wide receivers. So for all of those reasons, I definitely anticipate that in a high-paced, high-scoring Miami offense, that he'll get his legs back under him and he'll have a much better year in 2024.
No, I 100% agree with that. I think a lot of people forget that he was able to coexist in this offense with Tyreek Hill. A lot of people like to discount that and say that Tyreek kind of absorbs all the targets there. People like to discount the fact that, college quarterback, college wide receiver, that sort of, chemistry they had coming into the league. Even that rookie season that he had, that was just absolutely fantastic from Jaylen Waddle. And I think he's still got a ton left in the tank, like you said. So I really love this pick. I think he's due for a big bounce back this year. All the jokes I have about Jaylen Waddle, I've said on this channel. It's really been jokes. I really do respect Jaylen Waddle as a player, and I think he's going to be great going into the season.
Absolutely. Very excited to see what he can do this year. But let's get into the next player on the list. One of the guys that you wanted to bring up specifically who just got a fat contract as of yesterday, I believe? We're talking about Rhamondre Stevenson here.
Yes, so Rhamondre Stevenson got a 4-year, $36 million contract, $17 million of which guaranteed, which is going to make him the 7th highest paid running back in the league. And when I saw this news, I was absolutely kind of blown away because we really don't ever see the Patriots make moves like this ever. So this is sort of what I was talking about, earlier in this offseason, and I'm going to continue to talk about until we really get a good look at what this team looks like. We really don't know what this new look Patriots team is really going to do going into the future, how they're going to proceed forward. But it does seem that Rhamondre Stevenson is a big part of their plans going forward. And last year, a bit of an outlier year. He wasn't able to hit 100 yards in any game last season at all. I think closest he got was 98. Was still able to get 38 catches on the season. The season prior, he had 69, so nice. But that was also, just showing that he was able to, shoulder that amount and that workload. But it's just injuries were, sort of the story for Rhamondre Stevenson as well. And he wasn't able to finish last season as well. I think he finished the last 5 games of last year. One of the concerns for Rhamondre Stevenson, I guess, going into this offseason, Commanders former running back Antonio Gibson was picked up by the New England Patriots. So I guess some people figured that he would kind of eat into Rhamondre Stevenson's volume. Me personally, I don't really see that. What I see is they brought in a running back who had a similar set of skills, who is someone who can back up Rhamondre Stevenson pretty competently if he were to go down for a stretch of 5 games like he did last season. So with them paying him this money, making him the 7th highest paid running back in the league, I can't help but think that, they're going to lean on him a lot, especially with rookie quarterback Drake May back there, who we've already heard about him struggling this offseason a little bit. And who knows, Jacoby Brissett's probably going to roll out to start the season. But with that being said, that leaves a lot of room for Rhamondre Stevenson to get that bounce back and really solidify his role in that offense again.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that they are going to be run heavy at least to begin the season, regardless of what quarterback is under center to start. And I think that you make a good point with the Antonio Gibson addition. I think it's a fairly similar kind of strategic move as what LA did with Blake Corum, where they bring in a guy very similar to what they saw in Kyron Williams, not to supplant him, not to replace him, but in the case of an injury, if he were to go down, to have somebody that's not going to stray too far from what they were able to do in the offense. So I think that that's a really good point that you bring up. Also, I found a tweet here that talks about, he did get off to a slow start. He wasn't really himself in the beginning of the season.
Absolutely.
But between week 6 and week 12 prior to his injury that kind of slowed him down or sidelined him for most of the rest of the season, he was one of the best running backs in the league. In terms of yards per rush, he was 4th in the NFL, yards after contact, 8th, yards after contact per attempt, 2nd, missed tackles forced per attempt, 9th. So he was top 10 in a bunch of these efficiency metrics that I think really are indicative of what he was the year prior and earlier on in his career. And so I don't think that's gone away. I don't think he's slowed down. I think last year was more of an anomaly than anything else. And I would expect him to get back to the mean in 2024.
Absolutely agree.
All right. So that will lead us into another wide receiver here. We're bouncing between positions. I wanted to talk about Christian Watson. Somebody that I've been kind of up and down on in terms of my eval of him throughout his career so far, but I think I'm heading into the 2024 season. He's another guy, like Rhamondre, like Jaylen Waddle, that has dealt with a laundry list of injuries. The main culprit for him has been hamstring strains. He's had 3 of those reported in the last 2 years, and all 3 were actually to his right side, to his right hamstring. Now, I don't know if I'm reading into this too much. I don't know if I'm letting this impact my evaluation too much, but I think it's interesting and something that we should bring up. He's been working with the University of Wisconsin medical researchers to understand why he's so frequently had these hamstring injuries and potentially how to fix it. And they were able to tell him apparently that he had a 20% strength imbalance between his 2 hamstrings. And so far throughout the offseason, he's gotten that down to between 8 and 10%, with the goal to get it down to 6% by the start of the season. Could be nothing. It might not impact anything for him. We'll see, because he has been fairly injury prone to this point. But if that does reduce the frequency of the injuries or, potentially solve them for him, I think in terms of efficiency and what he's done when he has been healthy, he could really have a breakout year this year. So to kind of outline that, another Ryan J. Heath tweet, because he's been in on Christian Watson ever since he's gotten onto Twitter, really. One of the things that he talked about was catchable target rate for him. This tweet here compares him to Nico Collins, who just had his breakout year. Nico Collins in 2022 had a catchable target rate of 65.1%, which was the worst in the NFL at the time. That jumps to 81.7% in 2023, and you saw what that did for his fantasy production. Christian Watson in a similar boat in 2023, down at 67.9%. If that regresses to the mean, we could see, maybe a similar type jump. Obviously, Nico Collins had the quarterback change from bargain bin quarterbacks, C.J. Stroud. I think the catchable target rate was an anomaly for Jordan Love, whereas if you look at all of the other receivers on the Green Bay team, they had a much higher catchable target rate. And also, Christian Watson had like a crazy high ADOT, which was kind of abnormal due to his or compared to his career average. So that also makes completing passes a little bit more difficult. Um, but in terms of what we should expect from him going forward, um, we know that he's like a big boom week receiver. He actually had 6 games above 17 and a half underdog fantasy points over the past 2 years. That's the same amount as Brandon Ayuk and Jaylen Waddle, who we just referred to. Obviously, Ayuk played in 10 more games than Watson over that period, and he was still able to reach that mark. So he's got those boom weeks in the bag for him. And then his per route efficiency and his end zone targets are something that I think is really something you should highlight when talking about Christian Watson. 2.06 expected fantasy points per target since he's entered the league, which is third most amongst all wide receivers. And then also this tweet from Jacob Gibbs: 7 end zone targets in 14 games in 2022 and 14 in 9 games in 2023. I don't see a regression coming. That's always been a big part of his game. Jordan Love sent 14 of his 24 total end zone targets to Christian Watson while he was on the field last year. So he's like a boom week waiting to happen. He's a big, week winning type of player. He might not be the most consistent, but you don't need that from a guy that, we're talking about what, wide receiver like 40 dynasty prices right now?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that we're in a place right now. I think it's a slight difference in, I guess, opinion on this one, just because I feel like Christian Watson is a guy who pretty perfectly fits this offense in terms of like the role he plays. Obviously, they play a very vertical game. He's very much a playmaker. And obviously, these injuries very much nagged him throughout the entirety of last season. Before the season even started, we were hearing about this hamstring and stuff going on with it. So
Yeah.
I think that, sans any of the, injury stuff going on, he is the guy that they want to be, their number one guy there. Sort
Yeah.
of not Devontae Adams, but someone who can kind of replace him in that role and sort of taking on that. But I think the biggest issue has been health for him and staying
Yeah.
on the field. Because if he isn't, I feel like he is the number one guy out there. I feel like they tried to find, that role in guys like Luke Musgrave last year or in Romeo Dobbs, I guess, towards the end of the season. They were getting him down the field more. But
Yeah.
I think if they have him and just knowing the type of playmaker that he is, he could be someone that could consistently provide on a week-to-week basis. I think health is really the biggest issue.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. So potentially, an even better outlook there if you can expect a better week to week run out for Christian Watson. Something worth noting, not directly impacting him, but if he does stay healthy, I think the biggest detractor in that scenario would be Jaden Reed, which is unfortunate as, we saw him kind of come onto the scene and be a great rookie. If Christian Watson stays healthy, I think he's the one that's going to take the biggest bump. So just be aware of that as well in terms of just the dynasty landscape.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that take right there. And with that, we're going to move into the last player we wanted to talk about a guy who underperformed his ADP, and we kind of figured he was going to underperform his ADP. As a guy
Yeah.
he talked about a lot into this offseason, but we also talked about how he could pick it up going, as the season went along, which he did as the season went along as well. So it's a weird case, but we're talking about Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, this one is a weird one for me because I feel like Najee Harris, again, is a bounce back candidate. He obviously was getting better and better as the season went along, as he, I guess, I don't know, found his footing in the offense, or they started to realize what his role was and what Jaylen Warren's role was going to be, and they kind of solidified them in those. With that being said, they brought in better quarterback play, the best quarterback play really that Najee Harris has had his whole career, and still from a guy in Russell Wilson that will check down the running backs every once in a while if he needs to, especially with the way he plays nowadays. He's not as much as the improviser as he used to be. But when it comes to Najee Harris and people worrying about Jaylen Warren eating into his volume, of course it's going to be a split in the backfield. That's become very apparent. But even if we're just looking at carries alone, there were 400 opportunities between the two of them. They brought in Arthur Smith, who is a guy who likes to run the ball a lot. Now, one thing that does concern me a little bit about this situation is the fact that they brought in Cordero Patterson as well. Now,
Yeah.
Arthur Smith is known to throw some monkey wrenches into some situations by getting Cordero Patterson involved when we really feel like he shouldn't be. But
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin has also made it very apparent that assistant coaches make suggestions, head coaches make decisions. So we're going to see how that really ends up playing out. But if it plays out the way that we anticipate, it should still be the Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris show with a touch of Cordero Patterson for special teams or however they choose to use him. But I'm confident about Najee Harris going forward.
Yeah, so I like everything you said, but some things just to add on to some of the points you brought up. You talked about him having a slow start and being better at the end of the year. A lot of that was due to offensive line play. His offensive line was terrible to start the year, where he was hit behind the line of scrimmage on 29% of his rush attempts, which was the third worst rate in the league. And it took a while for that unit to kind of gain some cohesion, but by the end of the year, they actually turned into a much better run blocking unit together. And that change reflected itself at the end of the year for Najee, like you mentioned. He averaged 20 half PPR fantasy points per game over the last 3 weeks. I do hope that that carries over into 2024. I expect it to. But in addition to that, they brought in 3 rookies to bolster that offensive line, one being Troy Fautanu with a huge first-round investment. So I expect this unit to be one of the most improved in the entire league. And then another reason that we saw Najee struggle was his lack of passing game involvement. 2023 was by far his worst year as a receiver with only 38 targets. I was down from 54 the year prior and 94 his rookie season. And then you mentioned Jaylen Warren and his involvement in the defense. I don't expect it to get back to that 94 that we saw from his rookie season with Jaylen Warren being there. But you talked about Russell Wilson also. He was actually the league leader in check down rate by a considerable margin in 2023. He was the only quarterback in the league to check down at a rate 10% or higher. And considering that Wilson is arguably downgrading the wide receiver core going from Denver to Pittsburgh, I could see that that rate would continue to be fairly high for him. So I do think the receiving numbers will jump up. The last thing that we wanted to talk about here is the contract situation. It is a contract year for Najee Harris. The team recently declined his 5th-year option, which makes him probably a riskier dynasty asset than any of the guys that we've talked about so far on the list. But as you mentioned with Arthur Smith and his propensity to lean on that run game, I do expect that Najee is going to be heavily involved and an important asset to this offense. So I could see something similar to what we just saw with Rhamondre, where he was coming off of a struggling year, new coaching staff, and they showed that they trusted him and gave him that contract. At least Najee is going to have a year to kind of prove that he deserves it. And I think that he will be able to do that this year.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that that's going to be the case, and hopefully Cordero Patterson is just returning kicks with Justin Fields this season. Hopefully.
With Justin Fields. That's crazy that they're talking about doing that.
The opening trailer for Madden, Justin Fields returning a kick.
In the opening trailer.
Yep.
And handing off to Cordero Patterson in the kickoff. It's crazy. It's crazy. I will say, with the new kickoff rules, I think Cordero will be able to eat, but on special teams, hopefully, and that's mostly where he can be limited to. As much as I do love that guy as a player, I would love to see Jaylen Warren and Najee get the lion's share of carries back there.
100%. And we anticipate that that will be the case, but we got to wait and see because Arthur Smith is involved in this situation. So let's see. But with that being said, that's going to bring us to the end of our list. What do you guys think about these guys who underperformed their ADP? And is there anybody that we missed that you feel like is going to be prime for a pretty big bounce back season as well? Again, we're going off of, sort of like NFL rules, guys who underperformed, not so much guys who were injured because we're hoping, they just come back and perform. So I don't want to see Nick Chubb down there. But let us know guys who you feel like could, have a pretty good bounce back this year. And make sure you guys do all that great YouTube stuff. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way we drop all of our latest videos. And let us know in the comments down below, like I said, what you think of the list. But, Eric, you got anything for the people before we get out of here?
Yeah, if you guys could just check some of the links that we have down in the description below. Most importantly, to our Discord. We are, like I said, back to our normal schedule, and so we're talking in the Discord as much as we used to before. We're trying to get that back to how it was, where you're talking every single day about your dynasty teams, whether it be trades, whether it be about videos like this with bounce back players. Any questions at all that you have, we can have deep conversations over there. So please come join us at the link below. And also check out the link to our sponsors, whether it be Do Numbers. They got some cool merch, whether it be hoodies, t-shirts, hats, apparel of that nature. Go check that out with a discount code. And also Choice Music Group for some great music that they're putting out all the time. So we also end these videos with a little blurb of music from Choice Music Group, so be sure to listen to that. But I think that's it. So if you guys stuck with us all the way till the end, as always, we love you. We'll catch you in the next video. Peace.
Peace.